Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
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 Um, this is a new thing. My name is Zach Dunham. I'm with Bantam Tools. We threw this together this week because we wanted to connect with all of you. This engineering from home live stream. We're going to be doing this once a week, and I'm so excited to have two of my favorite people here, Mohit Bhoite and Sophy Wong, joining us. Thank you both again so much for making time today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah. Um, I just like to sort of position what this is and what we're trying to do here. I was just saying to Mohit and Sophie, like, we're used to actually like seeing each other in the hardware community through conferences and meetups and product launches. And given that everyone's having to be working remotely and working from home, um, we wanted to just have a way to connect with you all. So this today, what we're going to do is share equal parts stories of working from home and what's going on in our respective communities. We'll talk a little bit about how we can all potentially participate in COVID-19 relief efforts. And we're going to have two special guests, Seiwei and Taylor, who are at the front lines of the maker movement, designing things to support this effort. And then we don't want to forget a healthy amount of distraction. And so Mohit and Sophie and any of you who are joining us can share projects that you're working on. So one quick housekeeping note before I kick it over to Mohit and Sophie. There's a chat on the right. Click the chat, join us in the chat. You can also hit a button that says, there's a hand that says speak. If you tap that, you can hit like request to speak, and we'll see that, and then we'll invite you to come up on video and join us to share what it is that you're working on. So without further ado, Mohit, Sophie, do you both want to just introduce yourselves and share a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do?
Sure. Yeah. Oh, I'll go first. So I'm a designer, and this is so funny because I'm looking at your faces, and then I realize that my camera's up here. So I'm a designer and a maker. I'm based in Seattle, and I do a lot of different kinds of making. I do a lot of wearable projects. I do costumes. I do a lot of wearable electronics projects, and I document a lot of my work and post my projects up as tutorials. I've got a lot of articles in Hackspace that are tutorial projects, and I have some tutorials on Adafruit, and I'm a remote resident for Bantam, so I've been learning how to use the mill and just tinkering in all different kinds of ways. I make a lot of projects that are sort of more aesthetic projects that demonstrate techniques and processes, and put them out there for other people to take those ideas and work them into their own projects and make their own ideas come to life. So that's what I do.
Awesome. Thanks, Sophie. I'm gonna start link bombing in chat too while we talk.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. I'm Mohit. I'm a senior hardware engineer at Particle. So I help design Particle's flagship IoT products, things that talk to the internet over cellular or Wi-Fi. I've been with Particle for about 7 years now, help build all the electronics. But also on the sidelines, I'm an avid maker. I just love building things. My background is robotics, so I just love building robots, electronics, and now recently have developed a liking to making free-form electronic sculptures out of brass. But yeah, I mean, I just like try and learn new skills every day. Even though my background is in electronics, I love machining. And with help from Bantam, I was able to secure a tiny little CNC mill that I have been using for more than just making circuit boards. I've been trying to do more brass milling, wood milling, trying to incorporate that with the stuff that I built on the sidelines. So thank you, Bantam.
Yeah, of course. Circuit sculptures, and I should say, Mohit has been on our podcast, the Edge podcast. So if you want to hear some of those stories in more depth, check that out too. Let's Mohit, can you actually just give us an update? What's going on in San Francisco, and how is Particle and the team at Particle adapting to what's going on? How are people? How does an electrical engineer right now work remotely in such a distributed way?
Oh man, yeah. So Particle traditionally has been a remote-friendly company. Most of our engineering, if not all, has been remote. We have satellite offices in Boston, in Wisconsin, not Wisconsin, Minneapolis, and a huge contingent in China. And as you know, if you are building hardware, you have to be tightly knit with China. And so our work colleagues in China have been, severely impacted because of the quarantine. But slowly, the life is coming back to normal, so we can rely on them. As far as people here in San Francisco, they have been asked to work remotely much before, the mandate went out, and so they have been ahead of the curve as far as like taking precautions. And I have set up a tiny little lab at home, with like a tiny little baby refill oven, a soldering station, hot air station, stuff to keep things moving along. So things have been slow, but they are moving. Also, we have been doing a lot of stateside prototyping where we were using shops like Tempo Automation and Royal Circuits and Osh Park to get those PCBs made, because those facilities are still here.
Yeah.
So it's not that impacted, and the fact that Particle is taking care of everyone, it helps.
Just curious, so are the tiny little reflow ovens, so you're doing small circuit board assembly and R&D testing, just bringing everything into your home workspace?
Exactly. And fortunately, I spent 2 years working remotely from Minneapolis. And so I already have the rhythm to work from home as a hardware engineer, and just being able to collect tools like oscilloscopes, rework, assembly. I've been traditionally doing that just all throughout Particle's history. So this doesn't feel out of the ordinary. It's a bummer that we won't get to hang out with our coworkers and spitball on ideas and stuff like that. But that's why we have Zoom, and that's why we have Slack.
Right. Sophie, how are you? How are things changing for you in Seattle?
So it's funny because I don't know because I've been indoor. I've literally been self-isolating for about 3 weeks now. My husband and I have kind of been taking this seriously from the very beginning because my parents are in the high risk category. So as soon as we knew that this was going to be a thing, we started distancing, and I don't know what it looks like downtown. I haven't been going anywhere. I've been inside. And I have to say, it's not been that difficult for me because I already work from home, and I have all the comforts I could ask for. I feel so fortunate that I can just keep going with what I'm doing in my house. And I think that because it's so easy for me to do this, it's really my responsibility to do that. So yeah, I have noticed that a lot of my neighbors are doing the same thing. Like, because I'm home and I kind of have this baseline of what my neighborhood is like usually. I've noticed that not very many people are driving anywhere, and a lot of people are working from home because I see them taking their walks now. That usually it's pretty dead. So from what I've observed, people are really taking this seriously in Seattle, and they're working from home. I think a lot of people in Seattle are able to work from home, and they're doing so. And we can do that for the people who can't stay home right now. So yeah, for me, I, like Mohit, I feel very comfortable working from home, and I am happy to share anything that would help other people who are new to working from home and building things at home. I have been working from home for about 3 years now, and have done so off and on prior to that. And so I've kind of worked out some systems that work for me that seem like small things, but they
share.
really make a big difference. Okay, so for me, the number one thing I've been doing lately that has made a huge difference in my productivity and in how and in just managing my mental state when working from home is scheduling. I schedule everything. I schedule everything on my calendar. And that's like, I wake up in the morning and from 9 to 5 on my calendar, I have a full schedule and I know what I'm doing. I take an hour in the morning to do emails, some social stuff, some social media stuff, and invoicing and anything that's kind of like desk work. I get that done in the morning. And then I try to set up like segments of like 2 hours where I go deep on a project. And I set those 2 hours aside and I turn on a timer and I just put my phone away, close my computer, and I just work for 2 hours. And that's the only way I can do it without getting distracted. There's so many distractions at home. And that's really the only way that I've been able to kind of like focus my monkey mind and actually like sit down and it's just that I know that in 2 hours I'm going to get to look at my phone. But for those 2 hours, I'm able to like recognize the urge to do it and just delay it. I just ignore things that interrupt those 2 hours. And then at the end of the 2 hours, I'm like, okay, I get to like use my phone and check Twitter and all of that stuff. And it's just knowing that I have that time set aside is really helpful.
Yeah.
And then I don't schedule anything at night, like unless I know I'm going to work at night, because that's the other thing is when I work at home, I find it really difficult to curb my work. I just want to keep going. And that's how I end up accidentally working until like 2 a.m. So now I'm like, okay, if I'm going to work in the evening, if I'm going to work after dinner, I schedule it. I literally block it off on my calendar. And I say, okay, I'm only going to work until 10. And then I'm going to put my tools down and take a shower and go to sleep. And that's the only way I can wrangle that.
Yeah. I just dropped 2 things in while you were talking. Favorite timer clock project, this maker timer clock. And Preston has a really good point. The just constant binging social media news doesn't help. So yeah, setting those boundaries, setting schedule. I hear you. Mohit, what about you? Any tips or tools, physical or psychological, that you're using?
No, just like Sophia, the work I do is what it's like an extension of a hobby. And so being able to set those boundaries as to, where does work begin and, and it stop. So I use the calendar heavily, just for the exact same reason. When it comes to, designing circuit boards and PCBs, it just requires, your complete attention. So it's not very difficult to find the flow. You just like are into the Eagle CAD landscape and you just like are routing circuit boards and, it helps. It's almost meditative when you are in that zone. Same goes with soldering. You can't be looking at your phone or anywhere else when you're soldering. Yeah. I do listen to a lot of music lately. I think the genre is called chill hop on YouTube.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah, I'm doing something similar. I'm sort of addicted to this playlist on Spotify that's just called Lo-Fi Beats. And it's just like, it's just generic enough to not distract me, but, it's pleasant and it just, kind of keeps me going.
Absolutely.
I'm just looking around for my pocket operator, teenage engineering pocket operator, just a little Game Boy synth.
Oh, yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I wish I could make music. Like all the things I make, that's one thing that I have not been able to achieve is just make music. I'm like completely, I don't know what the opposite of talented would be, but I'm that when it comes to music.
Well, it's funny that you say that because music is something that I've dabbled with throughout my life. I used to take a lot of dance classes. I used to take voice lessons when I was a kid, but I never learned how to play an instrument. And something that I want to do now that we have additional time to stay at home and learn new skills is some music. I want to learn more about music and dabble more in music. Is there anything that you two are planning to pick up?
Yeah. Mohit, what about you?
I was just going to say that I love the visual aesthetics of making analog music, just like the giant Euro racks with like patch cards going everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
If I could have that dedicated, oh, come on, you're going to make us jealous now.
Show us the knobs.
Exactly.
Oh, I want to twiddle all those knobs.
I know, right? It's the tactile sensation of making electronic music. If I could have a wall dedicated to just that, and that could be your zone when you just like go and just poop, 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 and make music. That would be wonderful. But again, as I said, I can listen to music. Making music is a whole different thing.
There's some really modular synthesis, for people who aren't aware, is a totally an extremely addictive hobby, because all the modules just can continue to grow and grow and grow, and so it can become quite expensive. But I think for the creative, tech-minded person, it's actually a really fun way to make music, because there's always an element of chance in it. And so it's something that, like, I keep this on my desk because it's something that I can do without looking at a screen. And so after sitting in front of a computer all day, it's something that I can just come into, plug in a pair of headphones and make music and just get lost in the instrument, which is also really really helpful right now. But
yeah. I have a friend that's getting into the modular synths, and Mohit, to your point, he doesn't have a musical background. He doesn't really have a lot of musical education, but he's just enjoying playing with the sounds that come out of it. So his goal isn't to actually make any songs or make anything that he would call music, but he's just enjoying the process of twiddling the knobs, seeing what they do, learning just how the different modifications to that signal change the noise, the sound that comes out of it.
Well,
totally.
I was just going to say, the next Friday, maybe we'll have to pull in like a modular synthesis component to this live stream.
Ooh, yeah.
So,
that would be awesome.
And I feel like it has never been this easy. You have access to all the tools, like programming is easy, and 3D printing, you could be making your own modules. Like on your own.
Actually, there's a project on the Bantam website that I would love to do that is a milled, it's a little
AB8 sequencer, and
I would love to make that.
People in chat are saying projects, please. Should we do a round of show and tell, and then I'm going to see if Sewe and Taylor are on too, because they can join us for show and tell as well. Do either of you want to kick that off?
You go first.
Okay. So as I don't know if you can see the mill, but it's right there. So I have been just like playing with the mill, trying to come up with ideas and processes that I can use the Bantam tool to make things that I can use in the brass sculptures. And so, for example, this is a copper-clad board that is like now nicely aging with like a nice patina. That is just a copper-clad board with FR1 material that was milled, and this is the same pattern that was 3D printed earlier. So it's basically a RGB color mixer that I use for photography. Just like having colors in the background. It has like 3 RGB knobs and the white one. So this is a much older project. As far as the latest project goes, I'm trying. This is a sneak peek at the latest sculpture. Is a BU meter, like an audio level meter, but it's like neopixels. I have like 8 LEDs on, or WS2812Bs on either side. I have a tiny little Adafruit trinket that I'm planning on incorporating, and just let's see if we can play this. I have a tiny little audio amp for a microphone, and so it should react with sound.
Oh, that's cool.
Awesome.
Now imagine that going 3 ways. So
that's that would be beautiful.
Unfinished project as of now. But I just love Blinkies. For example, Adafruit makes these tiny alphanumeric displays that shows you. And I made a 3D printed enclosure that I can mount on a pegboard. And since this is connected to the internet through Wi-Fi using particle argon, I can display anything on the internet. I have a little tiny, like a social media counter showing an Instagram count. Again, using argon, tiny little 3D printed projects. Then I have, Chintu. I think you must have seen it.
There was a specific request for Chintu.
Let's see. Sorry for the background noise. So yeah, that's Chintu. As the power is going through the bottom. I used a tiny plastic red sheet, cut it out, and then it's just like press fit in between. And so that's the latest project I use. This was milled out of a 0.01-inch brass sheet. This is like a walnut. It looks simple, but there are like a lot of things that I had to experiment and tweak with. For example, this little pattern was not designed in a CAD software. I mean, it was, but it was designed in Eagle. So I use Bantam Tools, auto milling feature that you just, it treats it as a circuit board instead of a different piece of metal, and just being able to toy with that idea.
Nice.
Let's see if we can plug this. It right now fetches San Francisco weather. So let's see. This is a live demo. Ooh, I wonder what's happening. It's talking to the internet, connecting. I think it's running a different routine right now. I was taking pictures earlier to run through different emotions. Right now, it's not fetching weather, but just showing different emoticons. But that's what's up. And then, you saw this earlier, which is a tiny little 7-segment feather wing. The feather just allows you to prototype so quickly, just like plug and play modules. That makes life easy. And so before I make a sculpture, I will try to breadboard it first, try it on a PCB, then actually start freeforming. So
that's awesome. That totally your lighting project remind me of an old audio project that I was working on too.
Your projects are so beautiful, Mohit. They're just so beautifully designed. I think even your prototypes are so clean.
So here's the wall, like tiny little of matrices of LEDs. There's the Star Wars thingy, the robot thingy, like a tiny soldering desk here. And I discovered the IKEA domes that really nicely complement the brass sculptures with wood.
Ooh, that's a good find.
Yeah. So
that's a good
IKEA.
It's
cool to see your workspace.
Oh,
yeah.
There's the little baby refill oven in the back.
Oh, it's tiny.
Mohit, thank you so much. Sophie, what do you have going on?
So I'm working on a big costume project. It's a cosplay. It's a project, a character that I've really loved her costume ever since I was a little kid. And she's pretty obscure. She's from the 1985 movie Red Sonja, and she's the villain of the piece. She's this crazy evil queen. And she just has the coolest costume. I'm sure when I saw the movie, I had no idea what was going on in that movie, but I just loved her aesthetic and her look. So I've kind of wanted to make this for decades, and I finally am. And I'll just pan over so you can see the costume coming along. Whoa. So she's got all this black and gold kind of aesthetic. You can see this pattern here is where I've cut off the masking of the paint, so I can glue all of these medallions. I made a bunch of these medallions, so they're going to go all over. There's my little bin of molded and casted medallions. But in addition to the costume, I'm building a prop, which is this globe here, and it's called a talisman. They call it the talisman in the movie, and it's basically her weapon. Somehow with this orb, she can like level cities or something. I don't know how it works, but this is my prototype. This is my little small prototype just to work out the aesthetic and how I'm going to achieve the aesthetic. So I've just tinted the inside of this plastic sphere, and I've got, this is actually mostly hot glue over a cord that I glued down to get this kind of like raised surface, and then I'm painting it all gold, and these spikes I'm making I'm actually making them out of foam clay now, so they won't actually take anybody's eyes out. But this is small. It's going to be this big. So
Whoa.
I wanted to, and I want this whole thing to light up because in the movie it's got this glowing green action. And so my idea was to make lighting, an orb of light on the inside that's covered in neopixels. So my prototype for that is this little dodecahedron.
Nice.
And I want all of these sides to be PCBs. So I'm milling them on my Bantam. And this is what I've got so far. If you can see that.
Sweet.
So they're basically, and this is my first time designing PCBs in this, at this level, and milling them and soldering these tiny little 50-50 neopixels onto them. So pretty excited that I've gotten this far. But basically, it's just a circuit of 5, and I've got pins coming in and pins going out so I can connect them all together. And for now, I just have them connecting on a little tiny breadboard here. It's all being driven by this. It's a Itsy Bitsy M0 Express from Adafruit, and it's just running CircuitPython just in a sort of a demo code. And I think I'm on the right track. I feel like I'm going to get this to work, but it was a long haul to get here. I actually started a long time ago with the Bantam badge project, and that's where I was like, I need to figure out how to mill PCBs on this thing. So this was a great starter project for me to actually not have to worry about designing it and just worry about milling the board, soldering things onto it, and just learning from the way this project was designed. And then I started kind of working on my own attempts to design circuits and, varying degrees of success. And then I wanted to see if I could get neopixels on the board. Of course, at the time, I only had these tiny, tiny, tiny ones, which was a terrible idea for me personally. And my isolation traces, they're just so tiny. There was no way to solder it, but that was a good learning experience for me.
I have a tip for you. I recently discovered something called a peelable solder mask.
Ooh.
So what you can do is
I'm writing this down.
Yeah, and so you basically use that to isolate the things where you don't want to solder to go. And so you can cure this by using just a hot air gun in place, and then you can peel it off. And so I'm going to experiment with this and post a few pictures of the finding. But I think this for a milled PCB where you are trying to isolate, or soldering brass where you don't want the solder to go into where things shouldn't go. Try out this. I got this over DJK.
Very cool. Ooh, thank you. I will definitely try that. I basically ended up just making the isolation paths wider. And using actually the DRC file from Bantam for Eagle.
Yeah.
And it's actually really helped.
Really
and then I couldn't resist putting some decoration in the middle because it's this big blank space, so I just doodled something in there.
That's so awesome. There was this project, I want to say probably 6 years ago, maybe now 5 or 6 years ago, called Blinky Tiles. This guy Matt Metz, who is based in China. Maybe this is ringing bells for you, but this is when World Semi, the company that makes the WS2812s that Adafruit has branded the NeoPixel, they were making a DMX flavor of their LEDs, and I worked with those a lot, but that was really fun because they had parallel data connections, and so it really limited the wiring that was needed to do really intricate designs. Unfortunately, they're out of stock, but
I'm finding it really difficult to route these circuits on one layer, especially because just the design of the pins on the NeoPixel. Like they just assume that you're going to run it horizontally in the data from one is going to go into the data in of the other. But then you have to connect power and ground over, through a capacitor. And it's just like, how do you do that on one layer? So I'm running things around, and it's an interesting puzzle for me that I'm new to, because I'm new to designing PCBs. But a fun challenge that I can't wait to get better at. Actually, one thing I did that really helped me was on the design of my board, I added these little dots, and they're orientation dots for me to know, just from looking at the board, how to orient my NeoPixel when I'm putting it down, because in this design, to get the circuit to work, I had to kind of rotate the NeoPixel as I'm laying it down. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is something, I have to make 12 of these or 11 of these. Like, I'm definitely going to screw that up at some point. So rather than referring to a diagram every time, I thought, if I just put a dot near the corner, so every NeoPixel, every one of these has a cut corner, so that you can orient it. So I laid a dot down on the board where I want to orient, in the direction I want to point that cut corner. So now I know, just by looking at the board, I don't have to look away. I don't have to check a diagram. I know exactly how to put my NeoPixels down when I'm soldering. And that is so helpful. And I just did that in the art file. So the board, the circuit, I designed in Eagle, and I exported a BRD. And then the artwork I made in Illustrator. I was using Zach's trick that Zach taught me of creating an SVG, and you can actually load a BRD and an SVG into the Bantam software and mill them in the same operation and overlay them and line them up. So that's how I did that little marking trick.
Nice. I just invited Sayway and Taylor to join us as well. I don't want to make such a hard pivot back to reality, or not reality, but hard pivot back to COVID-19. But a lot of people recently have been talking about how people like you who are joining us can actually participate in this, and we put together a quick collection of some of the really cool organizations that have been cropping up over the last week. Let me drop this into Slack, or Amanda, if you're listening, if you wouldn't mind dropping it in, and I can start just quickly running through these, and then hopefully Taylor and Sayway can join us to talk about what it is that they're working on. So Project Open Air is the first one. This is an org. The landing page is a little bit of a mystery because there's not much there, but they're basically working to create medical devices such as open source ventilators that could be reproduced and assembled worldwide. The other big one is this open source medical supplies Facebook group, as well as, oh, hey guys.
Hi.
How's it going?
What's up? And helpful engineering is the next one. And actually, before I even try and give a description of that, Sayway and Taylor, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's good to see you both.
Good to see you.
Can you share a little bit about what helpful engineering is and how you've been involved with that group over the last?
Sure.
Last week?
Helpful engineering is like this grassroots effort to help with many different areas with the medical stuff that's going on with COVID. And there's many projects. There's people working on there's some software projects happening around data and information distribution. There's a bunch of physical hardware projects, like a ventilator project that's coming online. There's a mask project, which I'm involved in. And there's a face shield project that's in production and in the field getting tested right now, as well as other ones. And yeah, it's kind of amazing. There's a lot of people involved, a lot of really smart people with expertise just kind of chipping in any way they can.
And the project that you specifically been working on this past week is it's a respirator design.
Right. Yeah. So there, you probably have heard already. There's like a huge shortage of N95 masks. So healthcare people are, forced to recycle what they already have, or are just out of it and are using materials that are not meant for their purposes. So we're just kind of it's like a multi-pronged effort. There's a team that is about to publish basically an instruction set to use non-woven polypropylene to just make your own mask. So almost like a surgical mask that's coming out today or tomorrow. There's another team that's working on, I forget what all the other teams are. And then the one that I'm working on is a 3D printable hard respirator.
Do you have it?
Yeah, I can show you one. It looks like this.
Whoa.
So this is printed in a few parts. So this is printed, this way up. So there's no support material. And one of the guys on the Slack group figured that you can actually dip this in some hot water and then shape it to your face really easily, and you can do it over and over. So you have many tries to get it to be a perfect fit. Yeah, I think this is fit for Taylor. And then this is kind of like a generic filter adapter, and the plan is to use. So HEPA filters are rated higher than N95, so we're actually going lower than HEPA, so like MERV 14 still captures aerosol particles, or liquid particles. And so the plan is to acquire sheets of those, cut them to fit this, and these are really large to maintain the breathability that we need, so you don't you're still able to breathe. And this just like screws on here. So this 3D printed version is moving forward. The breathability testing with NIOSH has happened, and it's past that. And now we're working with some partners to get the particle testing through. And once that passes, then we'll go into production, hopefully early next week. And then at the same time, we're also looking at a silicone injection molded version of this. So there's a slightly different, it looks the same, but slightly tweaked for silicone injection molding. So that's on another track getting produced. Hopefully.
That's amazing. Before we started this, or maybe it was right at the beginning, Sophie said something like, I'm here, I want to help, I'm not, maybe like I'm waiting for the bat signal to be raised, and once that goes up, like let me know how I can help.
Right.
I think a lot of us are like peeking into these groups and going, what's going on? Like, can I use this PCB mill that I have on my desk? Or like, I have a 3D printer. How can I use that? What's your suggestion for people who are in that?
I think, like you were saying, I think you were mentioning some other efforts that are happening around the world. There are a lot of these. I think helpful engineering is packed right now. I think it's over 9,000 people have gone onto the channel. And so it's kind of super noisy. So I think what the kind of higher up of the org is asking people to do is to just like fill out a Google form to be like, here's what I can do, and here's what machines I have available. And so everyone from individual hobbyists all the way to like big manufacturers are filling out this, so that when we're ready to go into production for 3D printing, we'll call on everybody that has 3D printers to help out. Or once the ventilator's online, there might be some electronic PCB stuff that needs to be done, and that might you might be tapped for that.
Cool.
That said, if you can get onto the Slack, and you can also just like read up on what's going on. You can just see. You could just be like, here's an opening where this essentially what happened to me is like I was looking at the mass stuff, and I was like, there's a lot of people talking, but not a lot of people actually trying to make things. And I was like, I'll just take a stab. Other people were already making things as well, but I was just like, I'm just gonna try a thing, and it just happened to work well, so we moved forward with it. But I think there's a lot of that happening. Like, a lot of people are chiming in, but I think if you have something to contribute, like design work or CAD work, you should just do it. Like, don't wait to be called on. If you have an idea and you have the ability to actually execute it, you should just execute it and then show.
Cool. Thank you. First off, both this project and at the beginning of the week, you all both manufacturing jump ropes for people and sending them out to folks
Yeah.
to exercise was
We're
like.
about to do another round. We just got more cords, so I think we'll be able to send out, I don't know, 20-ish again.
That's amazing. We'll drop a link into
Cool.
the chat right now too with that. I was kind of feeling like 30, 40 minutes is a general amount of time for this live stream, but Sophie, you had mentioned that you had a story that you wanted to share. Maybe we can wrap with that.
Yeah, so along the lines of, all of us makers on the sidelines, we're so energized to want to help in any way that we can. In addition to 3D printing and the other types of making that we can do, a lot of people have sewing machines. And yesterday, I started to see a whole lot of buzz about sewing masks. Whether you want to sew masks for your personal use so you don't have to take valuable resources away from the medical professionals on the front lines, or whether you can sew masks for the doctors and nurses on the front lines who need surgical masks. All of that stuff is spinning up right now too, which is exciting. And I used to work at the costume shop at Seattle Opera, so I kind of have a line into the professional theatrical costume builders here in Seattle. And it was this beautiful thing that happened yesterday. Obviously they're all thinking the same thing. And there was a Facebook group that started of all the costumers, the stitchers and the cutters and the people who sew costumes day to day. The first thing they did was the theaters are donating all their supplies, all their medical supplies that they had. It's funny, like we had shows that had medical characters, so we had medical supplies in stock. So they just cleaned out all their stock and they're sending all their medical supplies to local hospitals. And then the next thing they thought of was like, well, we all can sew, and we can sew fast, and we can organize. So there's a Facebook group of local costumers, and it's like within 24 hours, I think there are hundreds of people on there now, and they're all organizing with the local hospitals to sew surgical masks to the specs asked for by the hospitals. There's a hospital here that I think is putting out kits so that you can sew to spec for the hospitals and include whatever filter material they want you to include. And it was just this amazing feeling that I had last night watching all these conversations happening. Like people who make costumes professionally, they're not just great at sewing, they're good at sourcing, they're great at organizing and planning logistically. So there's someone on there who's got like 80 yards of 1/4-inch elastic for the straps, and she's going to divvy it up, and they're going to do porch drops to get these materials to people in the network who can build these masks quickly. And it was just like, it felt like at the end of Lord of the Rings when the owls were like swooping in to help. I was just like, God, my costume family, like everyone is motivated. And it's just like, I think what you just mentioned earlier about having a place to register your skills and your equipment and what you can contribute, waiting for the information to come to you, letting you know what you can do, that's going to take a little bit of time to organize. But if you can say like, here's what I can contribute, here's what I have, here are the skills and my equipment and my supplies on hand, we can maybe organize these things and get these things done without having people run out to Joann's. They're like, I want to sew masks, but don't go to Joann's to buy fabric. We still need to socially distance ourselves while we're doing our part to help. So yeah, I just wanted to share that story of like, there are people the maker community on Twitter. We're all talking to each other and sharing ideas, but there are pockets of people everywhere, coming together to do this.
Yeah, agreed.
I have a small story very similar. My mom, who lives in Mumbai, I have a nephew, and he is a teenager, and so he has certain style requirements of a mask. And the green surgical mask that people have there, he just didn't like the look of it. So he asked my mom to stitch him a personal form-fitting mask made out of old T-shirts. I thought that was very inventful for her to hand stitch a mask just because he wanted a specific mask. And I think more and more people are doing that as far as like coming up with ideas, you're reusing your existing fabrics and making masks.
Yeah.
I dropped in a link to that my wife had shared with me of the Deaconess, which is how to make a face mask, and I think it's more along the lines of what you were sharing, Sophie. Well, this was awesome. I want to thank you all for jumping in and improvising with me on this first live stream. Next week we're committing to doing this basically every Friday at 3:00. So long as we have troops willing to share stories and do show and tell. Drop us a line at hello@Bantam Tools if you want to be part of this. If you have someone that you think we should have on to share about like work that they're doing, both creative and obviously related to COVID-19. And next week, we're going to be having a little bit more of a supply chain conversation. So we're going to bring in a close friend, Spencer Wright, who is all about infrastructure. He runs this newsletter called The Prepared, as well as this guy, Scott Miller, who runs up a company called Dragon Innovation. And they've been doing finding contract manufacturers for companies for the last 15 years in China and the Far East, as well as stateside. So we're going to be talking, at least for a portion of the time, around how local and global supply chains are adapting, collapsing, changing, and then do sort of the same thing where we do share creative projects and then also talk a little bit about the ways that these groups are continuing to rely on all of us and the tools that we have at home. So thank you, CW&T. That was super inspiring and really awesome to see that work. Sophie, Mohit, thank you both so much again for joining.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for this time. It's just great to see other people's faces and chat.
Absolutely.
Also, I just want to say, you, Mohit and Sophie, you guys, the work is so cool. I'm so impressed. It's really cool to meet you guys.
Yeah,
likewise.
Yeah, definitely likewise.
Yes. Cool. All right. Well, we'll post a link to the replay for people that maybe missed this. And next week, Sophie will institute your how many times did you touch a face while you were
right.
watching
I'm sure I did.
live stream. All right, y'all. Signing off from New York.
Bye.
Be well. Be
Take
safe.
care.
Okay.